The ABS, Australian Bureau of Statistics, though, has been accused of trying to censor the migration debate. It comes after economist Leith van Onselen was told by an ABS media officer that it was, quote, misleading to use monthly net permanent and long-term arrivals data as a measure of migration. The ABC's Media Watch program also weighed in.
And while, yes, the data has been used as an indicator of long-term migration trends, the experts we spoke to assured us that rather than being overwhelmed by migrants, in fact, we're getting fewer.
It is our expectation that net overseas migration will continue to fall when the next round of numbers is published in September.
Joining me now, the man himself, MacroBusiness Chief Economist Leith van Onselen. Leith, welcome to the program. I mean, take us through, the rationale here. How is net permanent and long-term arrivals data typically used as an indicator of migration?
Yeah, thanks, Peter. So, look, net permanent long-term arrivals has always been used as a leading indicator of net overseas migration. And the reason for that is that it's a monthly measure. So it gets released with basically, roughly a 2-month lag. And that compares to the quarterly net overseas migration data, which is on a 6 to 9 month lag. So, we're in September now, and we still don't have net overseas migration numbers. The last reading we got was in the fourth quarter of last year. So it's, nearly 9 months old. So as a result, us economists, we tend to use this net permanent long-term arrivals data to get a read on where migration is going. And what that measures, it basically measures border movements. So when someone arrives, they sign a passenger card and they say whether they want to whether they intend to come in permanently or on a long-term basis. And historically, the net permanent long-term arrivals data, which is produced monthly, tracks the net overseas migration numbers very closely, which is why we use it as a leading indicator.
And look, it also make the point in practical terms too, unless someone's a short-term tourist, if you're here in Australia for any length of time, you need a way to get around, you need a house to live in, you're possibly doing some sort of work. And often, as we do in this country, not every country does, you can come in as a non-permanent migrant, you might be a student or something, and you can migrate your way or shift across to being permanent over time. So I think it's very, very valid. So were you surprised that the Bureau of Statistics raised this as an issue?
Yeah, absolutely. So as I said, the net permanent long-term arrivals number has always been used as a leading indicator. It's been used by everyone for as long as I know. And even the Centre for Population, which is run out of the Australian Treasury, that's our official, government sub-department on migration. But in their official guide on migration statistics, they say that net permanent long-term arrivals is a leading indicator of net overseas migration. So I'm not really sure what the ABS's beef is. I was very perplexed.
And if the ABC's numbers are right, if the aggregate so far in the first half of the year is 280,000, if it tracks at those levels to the end of this year, what does that look like in terms of history?
Yeah, obviously, so 280,000 for the first 6 months this year is a record. It's the highest it's ever been. Look, I don't expect net overseas migration to be running quite that strong, but what I do think is I think net overseas migration has picked up again, and we're seeing that also in the rental market. So, the latest rental data, which has been released today by Cotality and SQM Research, etc., shows that rental vacancy rates have fallen again, and they're back towards record lows after rising a bit last year. And rental growth's also rising again, Peter. So, like the net permanent long-term arrivals data, this tightening rental market suggests that immigration is rising again. And I think that's the thing that we need to focus on here. The net permanent long-term arrivals is a directional measure, and it tracks the official net overseas migration in a directional sense, not so much in a number sense, but irrespective, it looks like net overseas migration is rising again when Labor promised that it was going to continue to fall.
Yeah, and what's interesting too, I mean, when you're looking at the data, when you're dealing with the ABS, when you're an economist, it's much harder for them to argue emotion with you. I mean, they can label people turning up at protest rallies yesterday as racists of some sort, but if you're looking at black and white numbers, you're not imputing any emotion into this, Leith. I can understand why the government would like you to disappear and not report on this sort of data. Talk to me about this piece you've written today. It's turned up this afternoon, that India will build 1 million homes for Indians. Fair enough. But this is in Australia. Tell us more.
Yeah, so this whole story reads and sounds like satire, and I hope it is satire because the Indian media overnight. So we're talking about the Economic Times of India, which is like their Financial Times or Australian Financial Review, and a whole bunch of other media outlets quoted an Indian minister who claimed that he's in quote deep negotiations with Australia to have Indian workers build 1 million homes in Australia, which is just ludicrous when you think about it. And I've reached out to Trade Minister Don Farrell's office to ask whether this is true and whether it's actually a real thing. I'm yet to hear back. It's incredibly cynical policy if it's true, because as we know, according to Costas, the pollsters' numbers, 85% of the Indian diaspora vote for Labor, and it could be Labor trying to gerrymander if that's the case, like bringing in a whole bunch of voters to vote Labor and then. Sorry.
Can I pull you up there? Are you saying, because that's a little bit different than the headline, are you saying this is Indian workers building homes in Australia for anyone? Or is it Indian workers building homes in Australia for Indians?
Yeah, well, I mean, we don't know. I think this whole thing sounds far-fetched, and I'm waiting to hear back from Minister Don Farrell's office. But as we know, like I very much doubt we'd be bringing in Indian workers just to come here, build homes and go home. They'd probably come over here to migrate, right? So if this is true, which I don't think it is, but I'm waiting to hear back, but it has been reported widely across the Indian media by quoting an Indian minister. It just sounds like complete satire, but it has been quoted across the Indian media, so I can only take him at the word. Wow. But if it's true, join the dots.